The woman in seat 2A. The airport terminal shimmered with polished marble floors and luxury boutiques, where time seemed to slow for the elite and speed up for everyone else. Passengers bustled about, dragging designer luggage and sipping overpriced lattes. In the middle of it all stood Clara Dalton, 37, dressed in a modest navy blue skirt, a white blouse and flats that had seen better days. To some, she blended into the background, but to others, especially those who judged by appearances, she stood out like a misplaced puzzle piece. Clara clutched her boarding pass and passport tightly as she approached the priority boarding gate marked First Class, Flight 117 to Santorini. She hesitated for a moment, adjusting her handbag. The strap slightly frayed at the edges. The airline crew, all poised and polished, glanced her way. One of them, a tall, perfectly styled woman with a clipboard and a strained smile, stepped forward. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, with a voice drenched in politeness but laced with suspicion. "This line is for first-class passengers only." Clara blinked. I know. I'm in seat 2A." She held up her ticket, hand slightly trembling, not out of fear, but out of discomfort from the unexpected attention. The woman barely glanced at the ticket. "I understand, but are you sure you're at the right airline? This is Skylux International, first class to Santorini." Another flight attendant, this one younger, with a headset and too much perfume, snickered softly and whispered something to her colleague. They both glanced at Clara's shoes. The crowd behind her grew impatient. A man in an Armani suit sighed dramatically. "Some people will do anything for an upgrade," he muttered. A few chuckles rippled through the line. Clara's cheeks burned, but she kept her voice steady. "My ticket is valid. My husband booked this seat for me." The woman at the gate raised an eyebrow. "And your husband's name is?" "Daniel," Clara said quietly. "Daniel Thorne." The name didn't register. Not to them. Not yet. Another round of smirks. "You'll have to step aside while we confirm this, Mom," the woman said with a forced smile, already waving the next passenger forward. The murmurs behind Clara got louder. Someone muttered something about dress codes in first class. Someone else said it must be some promotion or giveaway. Clara stepped to the side, her ticket still clutched tightly. Her eyes scanned the glass windows, watching luxury jets being guided across the tarmac. She took a slow breath and tried to remind herself. This was supposed to be a gift, a surprise vacation from Daniel after 3 years without a break, a thank you for the sacrifices she'd made. Instead, it felt like a punishment, a life of quiet strength. Clara had never cared for luxury. In fact, she had spent most of her life working hard and staying humble. Years before, she had been a high school teacher in a low-income district, passionate about her students, known for staying after school just to make sure a single mother's child got extra help with algebra. Her life took a dramatic turn when she met Daniel Thorne, not through parties or galas, but in a bookstore of all places. She was browsing the clearance shelf for used paperbacks. He was lost in the philosophy aisle. He had worn jeans and a hoodie, and she had no idea he was the CEO of Thorne Aerospace, a private aviation company that quietly dominated the luxury flight industry. He loved her simplicity, her kindness, her refusal to treat him differently once she learned who he was. They married in a quiet ceremony, no press, no designer gown, just love. Daniel always said, "The world may try to define us by appearances, but you, Clara, you define me." Back at the gate, "Ma'am, we've just spoken to a supervisor," the flight attendant finally said, eyes narrowing. "There's no record of a Daniel Thorne purchasing this ticket." Clara's heart dropped. "That's impossible," she whispered. "He confirmed it last night." I'm sorry. We'll need you to return to the general boarding area," the attendant said, her voice now firm and final. People were now watching openly. Someone in line snapped a picture. Someone else muttered, Why do they always pull this stunt? Can't they just fly coach like everyone else? Clara stood frozen. She could feel every judgmental glance, every whispered comment. The shame crept in, but she bit her lip. "Don't cry," she told herself. Then, a voice boomed from behind the crowd. "Excuse me," the voice said, low and commanding. The crowd shifted, and then he appeared. Wearing dark sunglasses and a charcoal gray suit, Daniel Thorne stepped through the security gate, escorted by 2 airline staff, and a senior manager clearly panicked. His tall frame and cool demeanor turned heads immediately. The same gate agent who had belittled Clara gasped audibly. Mr. Thorne." Daniel removed his glasses slowly. His eyes went straight to Clara, then to her ticket, then to the flight attendant. "I believe this is her seat," he said, pointing to Clara's boarding pass. "Seat 2A, first class." The attendant stammered. We didn't realize." "No," Daniel said, voice calm but sharp as glass. "You didn't bother to realize." He turned to Clara. "I'm sorry I was late. There was a last-minute board meeting, but I couldn't let you fly without a proper goodbye." He kissed her hand gently. Everyone watched in stunned silence. One of the business class passengers actually dropped his phone. Power revealed. "I didn't want to make a scene," Clara whispered to Daniel. "You didn't," he said. "They did." Daniel turned to the stunned staff. "Please escort my wife to her seat, and kindly inform the captain that I'll be joining her for takeoff." "But sir," the flight supervisor said nervously, "we only have one seat booked." Daniel smiled, then bumped someone, preferably someone who judged my wife by her shoes. The crowd gasped again. "No need," Clara said gently. "Let's just go." But the moment had already rippled through the entire terminal. Phones were out. Photos were taken. The man who had mocked her tried to disappear behind his briefcase. Daniel looked around, then said clearly, "Let this be a reminder. Wealth doesn't always wear labels, and respect doesn't cost a thing." The woman at the gate tried to stammer an apology. Daniel didn't wait for it. He simply placed his hand on Clara's back and guided her through the gate, where a line of flight crew now stood, back straight, expressions ashamed, ready to usher her in. Inside first class, as she took her seat, seat 2A, the very one she had been denied just minutes ago, Clara looked around. Every passenger now looked at her differently, not because she was wealthy, but because she had endured their judgment with grace. The champagne was poured. The flight was cleared for takeoff. But the moment everyone would remember, more than the luxury, more than the destination, was the quiet dignity of the woman who had been underestimated, and the stunning truth that followed. The offer that could change everything. The flight to Santorini cruised at 38,000 feet, but inside seat 2A, Clara Dalton sat quietly, her mind soaring in a completely different direction. The luxury that surrounded her, the silk-lined headrests, gold-trimmed dinnerware, and exclusive 5-star menu, felt like a different world. But it wasn't the champagne or imported chocolates that filled her thoughts. It was the way they had looked at her, the way they'd laughed, judged, dismissed her, and yet the way Daniel had walked through the cabin like a storm in a tailored suit, rewiring every power dynamic with just one calm sentence, it had left a mark on everyone. Now, as the flight attendants stumbled over themselves trying to serve her better, Clara kept her smile tight and her responses polite. She wasn't one to gloat, but she couldn't ignore the change in their eyes. Fear replacing arrogance, guilt replacing judgment. Even Camilla, the flight attendant who had tried to exile her to economy, hovered with visible tension, offering snacks and towels like sacred offerings. Clara accepted a cup of tea with a quiet, "Thank you." Her tone was gracious, but her thoughts were far from calm. The arrival that wasn't just a landing. As the plane touched down at the Santorini airport, Clara looked out the window and sighed at the beauty. White buildings glowing on cliff edges, blue domes catching sunlight, and waves that sparkled like crystal glass. Daniel leaned over, brushing her hand gently. "We're here." But Clara's expression remained unreadable. "I wanted this to be a celebration," he said softly. Instead, it turned into a spectacle. She didn't speak for a moment. Then, with the faintest smile, "I've had worse board meetings." Daniel chuckled under his breath. Still the same Clara. The airline had arranged a private car to take them to the Astra Eden Resort, one of the most exclusive on the island, coincidentally also owned by Daniel's holding company. As they drove up the winding cliffs, Clara allowed herself to enjoy the view, but a storm brewed inside her heart. It wasn't just what had happened on the flight. It was what she was starting to feel. Restlessness. The private terrace and the proposal, not that kind. Later that evening, dressed in a flowy sundress and barefoot on the terrace, Clara stood overlooking the Aegean Sea. A warm breeze brushed her skin, and yet she felt cold. Daniel emerged behind her, holding a folder. "I've been waiting for the right time," he said, placing it on the table. "But after today, I think it's more important than ever." Clara turned, brow raised. "What is it?" He flipped open the folder. Inside was a job proposal. Title: Global Director of Passenger Experience, Skylux International. "Wait," she said, blinking. "You're offering me a job?" "I created this position months ago," Daniel said. "You're the most qualified person I know. You've worked the aisles. You know the pulse of real passengers. You care." "I left that world behind, Daniel. I became a teacher. I never stopped leading." He interrupted. "Your charity work, your education programs, your community outreach. Clara, you've already changed hundreds of lives. But this," he pointed at the folder, "this could allow you to change millions." Clara looked away. "And if I say no?" Daniel smiled. "Then we enjoy our wine, watch the sunset, and I go back to being the guy who's lucky to call you my wife." The offer was genuine, pressureless, but heavy. Clara picked up the folder and flipped through its pages. The job wasn't a title on a paper. It was a mission: restructuring outdated policies, developing anti-discrimination training, creating accessibility programs for disabled passengers, and improving staff empathy training. She read the last sentence of the proposal aloud. "The power of a company is not in its profit, but in how it treats those with no power at all." Her eyes welled with tears. "You wrote that?" she asked. "You inspired it," Daniel replied. A night of truths. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She walked along the beach, barefoot, the moon trailing her like a guardian. The words of the gate agent still echoed in her mind. "This line is for first-class passengers only." What does first class mean? She wondered. Is it wealth? Labels? Clothes? Or maybe, just maybe, it was how a person handled injustice when no one was watching. Her phone buzzed. A message from her younger sister, Jenna. "OMG, you're trending. Someone uploaded a video. You handled that so gracefully. Proud of you." Clara clicked the link. The video was shaky but clear. It showed her calm defiance at the gate. The laughter. The flight attendant's condescension. Then Daniel's entrance. And her quiet strength through it all. It had over 2 million views in 6 hours. Hashtags flooded the comments. Hashtag shebelongs. Hashtag not just a wife. Hashtag dignity in silence. Hashtag Clara Dalton for CEO. Clara closed her phone. She didn't want viral fame. She wanted impact. An unexpected call. The next morning, Clara received a call from a blocked number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello, Ms. Dalton. This is Janice Morales, Director of Global Aviation Ethics Council. I saw what happened yesterday. I'd like to invite you to speak at our upcoming conference in Geneva. Your story is exactly what our industry needs to hear." Clara blinked. I'm not sure I'm the right person." "You're exactly the right person," Janice said, Not just because of what happened, but because of how you handled it. The world watched, and they listened. A moment of clarity. Back at the villa, Daniel found Clara sitting under a tree with a notepad. He smiled. "Planning your next lesson." "Something like that," she said, scribbling. "What's it say?" She turned the page toward him. It read, "The world doesn't need more bosses. It needs more leaders." Daniel smiled softly. "Is that a yes?" Clara nodded. "But on one condition." "Anything." "I don't want to be hired as your wife. I want to be hired as myself. I want the job offer to go through the official channel. I'll interview like anyone else. No shortcuts." Daniel laughed gently. "Deal. Though you're going to terrify the HR department." "I want to terrify the system," she said with a grin. The woman who redefined first class. 6 weeks later, Skylux International Headquarters, London. Clara Dalton adjusted the collar of her simple yet elegant blouse as she stepped into the towering glass building. At 9 a.m. sharp, the lobby buzzed with executives, marketing teams, and cabin crew in transit uniforms. All of them glanced up as she entered, some pausing mid-conversation. The whispers had already spread. "That's her. She's the one from the video. Wait, she's our new director." Clara ignored the murmurs. She'd faced worse. After all, she wasn't walking into this role for applause. She was here to change a culture that had forgotten why service mattered. Her first step as director of passenger experience was to sit down, not in a boardroom, but in a break room with real employees, flight attendants, ground crew, call center reps. She listened, took notes, drank vending machine coffee instead of catered lattes. "Tell me everything you wish the leadership actually understood," she told them. By the end of her second week, she had read 200+ passenger complaints and responded to half of them personally. She had plans, not just on paper, in motion. But it wasn't until her third week that the test she didn't expect arrived. The training session, and the woman who walked in. "Welcome, everyone." Clara greeted the 30 people seated in the training room, mostly cabin crew. "This new empathy module isn't just another lecture. It's a conversation, a reckoning, even. Because service starts before the smile. It starts with mindset." She clicked the remote, revealing a slide titled, "Bias at 38,000 feet, when appearance overrides identity." The door creaked open. A latecomer stepped in, cheeks flushed, eyes lowered. It was Camilla Reynolds. Yes, that Camilla. The very same senior flight attendant who had humiliated Clara in front of the first-class passengers. The woman who had mocked her shoes, questioned her ticket, and nearly had her removed from the flight. Camilla froze in place, recognition hitting her like turbulence. Clara paused. Every eye turned to her, waiting. But she said nothing. Just offered a nod. "Welcome. Please take a seat." Camilla sat in the back row. Her hands visibly trembled as she took out her notepad. For once, she didn't wear her badge like a crown. She wore it like a weight, a voice of experience, not vengeance. Clara's voice was steady. "I want to begin by telling you a story," she said, "about a woman who was denied her rightful seat, not because her ticket was invalid, but because she didn't look the part." Camilla's eyes darted to the floor. "The attendants assumed she didn't belong," Clara continued. "They judged her by her appearance, not her worth. They laughed, whispered, made her feel small, but they didn't know her story. They didn't know she had once flown in their shoes, that she had walked the aisles serving others, day after day, with compassion." Clara paused. The room was silent. And they didn't know that she would become their leader. Gasps spread across the room. Some attendants looked between Clara and Camilla, realization dawning. The viral video. The promotion. The headlines. It had been her all along. A private conversation. The apology. After the session, most attendees stayed back to thank Clara, but Camilla hung behind, gripping her notebook tightly. "Mrs. Dalton," she began, Voice quiet. I. Clara, she corrected gently. Camilla nodded. Clara, I need to apologize. No, I have to. Clara waited. I was wrong, Camilla said. I was arrogant. I was unfair. I didn't even read your ticket. I just judged you. Clara let the silence stretch. I've been doing this job for 15 years, Camilla added, her voice cracking, and it took 30 minutes in a cabin with you to realize how far I'd drifted from the reason I started this career in the first place. Clara nodded, finally speaking. I wasn't angry that you doubted my status, Camilla. I was hurt that you doubted my humanity. Tears welled in Camilla's eyes. I understand. And I swear, I will do better. You already have, Clara said. You showed up. You listened. And now, you'll lead. Lead. Camilla blinked. Clara smiled faintly. You're going to head our bias awareness in service module. You'll design it, train others, and use your story as an example. Not as punishment, but as power. Camilla's lips trembled. Are you sure? Camilla. Clara said firmly, when people grow, they deserve a second chance. But they have to earn it. This is yours. Camilla nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you. Leadership, redefined. Over the next 3 months, the changes at Skylux International were undeniable. Passenger complaints dropped by 46%. First-class upgrades were no longer based on appearances, but on merit programs, community work, and loyalty beyond spending. Ground staff were given empathy training. Flight crews were rotated across different routes to increase exposure to global cultures and dialects. Clara launched a new initiative called Invisible Stories, a monthly profile series highlighting the journeys of overlooked passengers, employees, and volunteers. More importantly, passengers began to feel something rare in the skies again. Seen. The reunion flight. One day, while flying from Paris to New York, Clara walked through the aisle of a fully booked flight. She passed a mother with 2 children in economy, one of them clinging to a stuffed bear, the other quietly coloring. Clara paused. Ma'am, she said softly, would you and your kids like to move to 3 open seats in business class? The woman blinked. Are you serious? Very. Clara smiled. Everyone deserves a little comfort, especially mothers. A passenger in a suit nearby frowned. Why her and not me? Clara looked him in the eye. Because you already think you deserve it. She doesn't. The man went silent. The woman cried as she accepted. A global message. A year later, Clara was invited to speak at the Global Aviation Leadership Summit in Dubai. She stood on the grand stage, a backdrop of luxury jets and world flags behind her. My name is Clara Dalton, she began, and I was once told I didn't belong in first class, not because of my passport, not because of my ticket, but because of my shoes. The crowd leaned in. What they didn't know, she continued, was that I once walked every aisle of that plane, handing out smiles, cleaning trays, comforting children, helping nervous flyers breathe. She paused. And what I want every airline, every employee, every human being to remember is this. You don't need $1 million to treat someone like they matter. You just need heart. Thunderous applause followed, not because she was a CEO's wife, but because she had become a voice for millions. Final scene. Back on the balcony. Back at their Santorini villa, Clara sat with Daniel once again on the same balcony where it had all started. I never asked, he said, refilling her wine glass. Do you miss being a teacher? Clara smiled. I still am one, just with a different classroom now. Daniel raised his glass. To the woman who changed the skies. Clara raised hers too, to the world finally learning to see past appearances. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sea in gold and fire, Clara Dalton knew this was more than a career. It was a calling. And she had answered. What this story teaches us. Sometimes the quietest people carry the strongest voices. Sometimes the ones who are judged the most are the ones who later judge with compassion. And sometimes first class isn't about where you sit. It's about how you treat others on the way there. If you loved Clara's journey, don't forget to subscribe for more true-to-life inspirational stories. Leave a comment below. Have you ever been judged unfairly based on appearance? Or have you witnessed someone rise above mistreatment with grace? We'd love to hear your story.